Fallout 76. To say that this game had a rough launch would be quite the understatement. To be fair, things are a lot more stable now. There's not much in the way of controversy surrounding Fallout 76 now. They're steadily releasing content for what remains of the community. But that's not to say that Fallout 76 didn't do a number on Bethesda's reputation. I think a big part of it had to do with the fact that Bethesda hyperbolically marketed this game, exaggerated many aspects of it, 16 times the detail. That quote comes to mind. Now, ever since all of this started, Bethesda's been overall very quiet about the whole fiasco. A lot of the higher-ups haven't said a word. People like Pete Hines, who is usually pretty active on Twitter, hasn't really said anything about all the backlash surrounding the game. But that all kind of changes with an interview that IGN did with none other than Todd Howard. In an 8-minute segment of a full interview, the host, Ryan McCaffrey, asked as many questions as he could to Todd Howard in regards to what happened with this game and all the debacle surrounding it. Not every topic was covered here, but they generally talked about what happened, and Todd Howard shared his thoughts about the whole situation. The interview began with a discussion on who exactly worked on Fallout 76. Was it mainly the studio in Austin, or was the main studio in Maryland also heavily involved? To which Todd Howard honestly responded that a lot of people from a lot of Bethesda's divisions worked on this game, including people in Maryland. So people like Todd Howard were actually pretty heavily involved in the development of this project, and he wasn't shy about that. From there, Ryan brought up the well-known fact that Fallout 76 was not critically well-received at all, and asked if Todd Howard had any idea before the game launched if Fallout 76 would land, or if he was actually surprised by the negative reception surrounding this game. To that, Todd Howard had this to say.
We knew we were going to have a lot of bumps. That's a difficult development. A lot of new systems and things like that. Hey, we're going to go try this new thing. And anytime you're going to do something new like that, you're going to have your bumps. You know that a lot of people might say, that's not the game we want from you, but we still want to be somebody who's trying new things. And that was a very difficult development on that game to get it where it was. And we were ready for, a lot of those difficulties ended up on the screen, and we knew, hey, look, this is not the type of game that people are used to from us, and we're going to get some criticism on it. And a lot of that very well-deserved criticism.
Okay, so I definitely do not agree with the whole notion that much of Fallout 76's criticism had to do with people being skeptical about Bethesda developing an online game rather than a single-player game. Don't get me wrong, there was definitely a lot of that, especially when the game was first announced, but once the game launched, the criticism became about the fact that the game itself just wasn't any good. It just wasn't a good product. It didn't matter that it's a non-traditional Bethesda game. What people focused on was the fact that this game clearly needed a few more months of additional development. Now, Todd does at least admit that the criticism levied against Fallout 76, much of it is well-deserved. He doesn't try to downplay some of what I think is very valid criticism at the very least, but he's trying to go for the angle that people are just not used to the type of game Fallout 76 is coming from Bethesda, when in reality it is just a woefully unfinished, undercooked product that they put out there, sold for $60 without actually finishing it. And from the sound of things, it would seem as though Todd Howard and Bethesda as a whole knew that this game would not be well received, and they decided to charge $60 for the game anyway, even though they knew that it would have rough patches, which, that's just not cool. You don't develop a game with a mentality that this is probably not going to score well, but we'll get it out there anyway. You try to make the best product possible, something that you're confident will please critics and audiences before you charge money. From there, Ryan raised the point that Todd Howard, for the most part, had been on a streak before Fallout 76 happened. For a while, he had been making a lot of games that were really acclaimed, that a lot of people loved, and then Fallout 76 is this major bump on the road. To that, Todd Howard responded as follows.
You'd been on, quite the hot Las Vegas type of winning streak.
Sure.
You personally, like a Todd Howard, your name on something. So that was.
But we knew that going into this. We knew it's not that, right?
Yeah.
You would say, look, this isn't a game. Even from the beginning, this is not going to be like high Metacritic game. That's not what this is, given what it is.
What he seems to be implying here is that he went into this game's development knowing that it wasn't going to score high, knowing that it wouldn't be well received. And I'm not sure that's the kind of mindset you want to have going into a game's development. Also, what does he mean when he says that he knew Fallout 76 wouldn't score high given what it is? Is he trying to imply that because it is an online game, a live service from Bethesda, it had no possibility of scoring high on Metacritic or being well received by gamers? If that's indeed what he's saying, then that notion is absolutely absurd. If they just made a good online Fallout experience, people would be receptive to it. Sure, some people might say that this isn't Fallout, this isn't what I'm used to, but people would at least be able to appreciate that it is a solid online experience, and it would be more about whether it's your type of experience or not, rather than is it a good product. And Fallout 76 absolutely wasn't a good product at launch. This game had all the chance in the world to garner a solid score and a solid reception. Frankly, the concept for a lot of people sounded compelling. It's just the execution was completely and utterly botched because a lot of ideas just didn't come together. A lot of the conceptualization surrounding this game is just bafflingly bad. Todd Howard then added something that doesn't quite sit well with me. He said that he doesn't believe that a game is about how it launches, but rather what it becomes. Here's his full quote.
We felt strongly this is a game we want to play. This is something we really want to do. And all of the games like this, whether it's us or somebody else, you can go back and look at them. There's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes. And, can't be prouder of the team that's worked on it. They've worked tirelessly.
So look, I'm not going to deny that what a game becomes from launch is absolutely vital, but I wholeheartedly disagree with this notion that launch just doesn't matter because you can fix things down the line. Why does it have to be that what a game becomes is more of a priority than launch? Why can't both of these aspects be a priority? Why can't a game have a great launch and then have great post-launch content? It's this mentality right here of, oh, launch doesn't matter, who cares, we'll fix it later, that's made the AAA landscape what it is now. It's what's made a lot of publishers complacent to releasing unfinished games and still selling them at full price, knowing full well that it's not going to be well received, but they don't care as long as they rake in the cash, they make the microtransactions money, they become over-reliant on the roadmap that has all the content that should have been in the base game, and it gives them this idea that they can rush games out, it's all good, because they'll fix it later and people will eat that shit up. That's the mentality that they have, and we're getting worse quality products than ever before. But here's the thing that these companies don't seem to understand. People don't want to spend $60 on a product that is compromised and that they'll have to wait months or years on before it's in an adequate state. They pay $60 so they can play a good game, a solid experience right there and then. But this is a concept developers no longer care about, as long as they can just rush their product out there and start monetizing it as soon as possible. They'll just advertise this roadmap that may or may not pan out. In the case of Anthem right now, that roadmap is a complete shit show. It didn't pan out in any way, shape, or form. Right now, if you go to the Anthem roadmap, there's nothing there anymore because they delayed everything and nobody at BioWare knows exactly when we can expect the promised features to be released. Developers seem to think they can get away with this stuff, but people are becoming more and more privy to this. They're becoming more frustrated that this stuff keeps happening over and over again, this over-reliance on roadmaps, and we're seeing that people are becoming less and less tolerant each time something like this happens. The backlash is becoming greater. The fact of the matter is that developers need to finish their goddamn games at launch. Stop saying that launch doesn't matter or believing that launch isn't as important. They need to offer a complete and fulfilling experience on release day and then build upon a solid foundation. They need to stop launching a game whose foundation is still under construction, whose foundation will be finished a year down the line, while the players act as beta testers for this under construction foundation despite the fact that they paid for a finished product. The foundation needs to be completed and then they need to add on top of that. That's how it should work. Moving on, Ryan asked Todd Howard how he intends to recoup some of the reputation that he's lost as a result of Fallout 76. To that, Todd Howard simply said that he has no strategy other than to make Fallout 76 better, to work through the issues that the game's currently facing, and to read all the comments and feedback that he's getting, however harsh or negative. He also added that there is new Fallout 76 content that will be talked about at E3 2019, and he believes that people will be excited in terms of what's to come. Yeah, I'm gonna let the people be the judge of that. I'm gonna take that with a grain of salt, given that last time Todd Howard hyped something up at E3, That was Fallout 76, and we know how that turned out. We know about all the exaggerations that were made during the event, stuff that the final game completely underdelivered when it released. For my part, when it comes to winning back reputation, I'd say maybe be more truthful with the marketing campaign of your games moving forward, and maybe consider launching games when they're absolutely ready moving forward. Consider delaying your games if they're in a state where it shouldn't be launched, where it shouldn't be sold for $60 or more. If you just do that consistently, people will appreciate you. It's really not rocket science. Now, one could look at a game like No Man's Sky and talk about how it had a super rough launch but has recovered since with consistent content updates, and it's now in a much better place. So yeah, it's not entirely impossible that Fallout 76 might see something similar a year down the line, but even when that happens, that doesn't mean the shadow of Fallout 76's disastrous launch won't loom. It doesn't mean that suddenly goes away. It doesn't mean people will forget about that. It doesn't mean people find it acceptable that on launch day, the product that they were given, the product that they bought, was just in a completely unacceptable state. From there, Ryan asked Todd Howard whether he reads reviews, to which Todd Howard responded that yes, he does in fact read reviews and comments. He reads everything, both the positive and the really negative stuff. He explained how he believes that even the harshest and most mean-spirited feedback has some positive intent behind it, has some well-meaning, because stuff like that is a sign that people actually care and are emotionally invested in the company and its products, its games, its experiences. So he feels as though he does have to dig through these comments and see where him and Bethesda as a company can improve. I will say that I do like this aspect of Todd Howard's responses. I do like the attitude here in regards to how he's viewing feedback. It definitely sucks that he's probably getting a lot of toxic, nasty comments thrown his way, stuff that isn't really constructive, but he understands that when there is such a big backlash, it usually means that a lot of people care. They really wanted to like something, they wanted it to succeed, and they're disappointed that it didn't pan out that way, and that's certainly a lot better than complete apathy. Todd was then asked what he learned from Fallout 76, a game that launched despite the development team knowing that there would be a lot of bumps along the way. To that, Todd said that the main lesson he learned is that he needed to let Fallout 76 bake longer with a large audience playing it before officially launching it and charging money for it. He said that if there's one thing he would have done differently, it would be that he'd have more people playing Fallout 76 24/7 and getting a lot of feedback and correcting all the issues before saying, pay us.
Well, the main takeaway we had was you gotta let it bake with a large live audience for longer than we did. There's just certain things you can never see until it's running 24/7 for a number of months. So, you know, if there's one thing that we could have, I think I would have done differently, is find a way to let at scale people be playing the game 24/7 before you say, you know, everybody in, here you go, pay us.
So I think he's maybe saying something along the lines of the beta might have been too short, too restrictive. It would have been a lot better if more people played the beta for free and tested aspects of the game out, and Bethesda improved based on that feedback before actually launching the game. And yeah, a lot of people saw this coming. A lot of people were worried by how close the beta seemed to Fallout 76's launch and how short the time frame of these betas seemed. It wasn't even a 24/7 thing. The betas were hosted on specific time frames on specific days. It was weird. There definitely didn't seem like there was enough time to fix everything wrong with Fallout 76, and this was feedback that was relayed pretty loudly by the community who tried the beta, and yet still Bethesda launched the game on the release date at $60, and the rest is history. We know what happened there. It rubbed people the wrong way. It seemed immoral for Bethesda to release this when it clearly wasn't ready and charge all this money for it. Now, going back to the topic of reputation, Ryan asked if Todd believes Fallout and Bethesda's reputation as a whole has been negatively impacted or damaged by Fallout 76's disastrous launch. Todd responded pretty candidly. He said that it would be naive to say that there's been no effect on reputation. But then he added that he believes that if people go back and play Fallout 76 now, they'll be surprised by how much progress it's made. And he said that he's pretty proud of the game's current state, and that because he knows what's coming, he's really excited to see where Fallout 76 is headed next with future content updates. To finish this segment of the interview, Ryan brought up games like No Man's Sky and Sea of Thieves, which also saw very rough launches, but have made slowly but surely a pretty significant comeback. Things are a lot more positive for these games now after various updates and patches. In response to that, Todd claimed that pretty much all popular online games have gone through this cycle of a bumpy launch followed by a great recovery and a great long-term reception. He said that with all of these long-term games, if you go back and look at Day Zero, you can see how bumpy these games were back in the day before they got to where they are now, a much better place. He brought up Elder Scrolls Online as an example, said that that's a game that was received rather somewhat poorly or kind of middlingly at launch, but is now in a much better place. He touted how it's one of the most played MMOs in the world now, and he seemed to imply that he believes that Fallout 76 can see a similar type of renaissance. But the thing is, I feel like Elder Scrolls Online launched in a much less rough state than Fallout 76 did. I would say that few AAA games have launched quite as roughly as Fallout 76 did. The only exception is maybe Anthem. That game somehow managed to surpass Fallout 76 in terms of launch shitshow. Again, I bring up the point, why can't you have a great launch followed by great post-launch? Sure, there are games that can recover from a rough launch, but I'm not sure how that excuses games launching half-baked. Not sure how the potential for recovery excuses fucking over day one customers with a half-baked product. Not sure how that detracts from how immoral it is to ship a product that isn't finished and that isn't ready to be sold and charge money for it. It just feels to me like Todd Howard is giving an easy pass to occurrences like Fallout 76 and Anthem, when in reality stuff like this should not be encouraged. I mean, there are plenty of games out there right now that are live services that had a great launch and that continue to follow that up with great post-launch updates. So games like Splatoon 2 and Monster Hunter World come to mind. Both of these games kicked off strong and they keep getting stronger, and these are just two examples. I know that Division 2 had a pretty good launch overall, and I think they are in a bit of a rough patch right now when it comes to endgame, but at least there is still a solid foundation upon which they can build upon. They didn't release a foundation under construction, they released a full foundation that can be layered with extra content. Fallout 76 could have seen a similar type of launch had it cooked more in the oven. It could have kick-started with a lot of positive momentum that could build from there, and it could have shipped polished and complete. But because of this mentality of rush now, fix later, the game's just lost a lot of momentum, and while there's still a community around it, it's not a dead game by any means, there's still no denying that this community could have been a lot stronger had Bethesda shipped a proper product, had they made a good first impression. First impressions do matter, Todd Howard. First impressions define whether a lot of people keep playing your game or whether they move on to other experiences, because this is now a very competitive market. There's tons of live services out there right now trying to attract people's attention, and people have a limited amount of time. They're going to pick one or two things they're going to keep playing, and if your game launches in such a rough state because you have this notion that launch doesn't matter, that all that matters is what a game's become, that's just, in my opinion, incredibly naive, and it sets a dangerous precedent in terms of how publishers treat their games and how they launch their games moving forward. So yeah, overall, to make a long story short, I'm not very receptive when it comes to what Todd Howard is insinuating here for the most part. I do like some things he said, like how he perceives negative feedback as people who are being passionate, even if some of that stuff is very negative and very toxic. Overall, he values feedback and sees it as people caring rather than people just trying to bring him down, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I make videos like these because I actually care about Bethesda. I grew up with Bethesda. I don't want to see Bethesda fail, which is why I'm so frustrated by how they handled Fallout 76 and by some of the things that Todd Howard is saying here. in regards to being nonchalant about shipping a game with the expectation that it's not going to get a high metascore or good reception, about deeming game launches not all that important because what matters is what games become. Stuff like that really frustrates me, and we have seen how this kind of mentality has negatively impacted the AAA landscape in our modern day and age. It is the kind of mentality that makes the AAA landscape such a minefield for consumers nowadays, who are being fed bullshit and promised the moon when in reality the game will reach the moon in a year or two. So yeah, there you have it, folks. This is what I have to say about Todd Howard's statements in the interview that he participated in with IGN. Let me know in the comments below what your take is on what was said in this interview, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!